प्रभु तव मूर्ति विनोदकारी पलपन विसरे नहीं जो विसारी जुगल चरण सोल चिन्ह जेह नजर समीपे रहो हमारी एह श्री हरि कृष्ण महाराज ની જય ઘનશ્યામ महाराज ની જય સ્વામિનારાયણ ભગવાન ની જય. Supreme Almighty Lord Swaminarayan, the path maker to our liberation, our Pujapad Divine Guruji, and all of you devotees who are watching, my humble Jai Swaminarayan. For the past 2 lectures, we've been discussing on various Vachnamruts and analyzing them and understanding them so we can better progress on the path of liberation and attain our ultimate goal, which is Bhagwan. Now, for the past week, I've been thinking about which Vachnamrut should I discuss about today with all of you. And after thinking for some time, if we think our ultimate goal is to attain God, then there has to be a certain kind of process. If you think about anything, there's always a certain kind of process. For example, if one wants to build a skyscraper, a building, a really tall building, then first and foremost, one needs a site location. After that is decided, one needs to purchase that location. After that, then one needs a budget in order to make that building possible. After that, when work is going to start, the first step is to dig the foundation of that skyscraper, and then pour cement or whatever foundation material is needed in order for that foundation to become strong. Moving on, then all the processes of beam work begins, and then the windows, and then the inside, and then finally it's finished. Also, you can take an example of simply making a cake. First and foremost, you need flour, sugar, and other ingredients in order to make the cake. After that, you mix the ingredients together, you preheat your oven, and then once your oven is ready, you put the cake in, and after some time, it's ready. In the same way, in the same exact way, just how there's a process in the world, just how there's a process in everything, there's a process in attaining our ultimate goal, which is Supreme Lord Head Bhagwan Swaminarayan. In order for that to happen, we must learn what the first step is, what the second step is, what the third step is, until we have attained God. Now, as I was talking to you about how I was thinking about which Vachnamrut should I discuss with you for this lecture, I stumbled upon the Vachnamrut, Gadara, 1st chapter, 20th Vachnamrut. The title of this is An Ignorant Person in Seeing One's Own Self. Now, the second part is very important, seeing one's own self. But you'll see my point of how we must take a step, the initial step, in order to progress on the path of liberation. So first, just like every time, I'm going to overview and read the whole Vachnamrut, and then we're going to analyze in detail each and every part and understand it. Swaminarayan Hare, Swaminarayan Hare. On Posh Sudi 2nd, Samvat 1876, American date, December 19th, 1819, Shree Maharaj was seated on a cushion with a cylindrical pillow on the veranda outside the east-facing rooms of Dada Khacher's Darbar in Gujarat. He had tied a white bag around his head, and a tassel of yellow flowers had been placed in that bag. A garland of yellow flowers had been placed around his neck, and bunches of white and yellow flowers had been placed upon his ears. He had also covered himself with a thick white cotton cloth and was wearing a black bordered kish. At that time, spiritual readings had commenced, and Paramahansas, as well as devotees from various places, had gathered before Shriji Maharaj. Then Swami Sri Sajanji Maharaj said, "Please listen, I wish to ask all of you a question." Hearing this, all of the devotees said, with folded hands, "Please do ask." Thereupon, Shriji Maharaj asked, "Who is the most ignorant of all ignorant people?" Everyone pondered over the question, but no one was able to reply. So Shriji Maharaj said, "Here, I shall answer myself." Hearing this, everyone was pleased and said, "Maharaj, only you will be able to give a precise answer, so please explain." Shriji Maharaj then began, "The Jeev, which resides within the body, observes both the attractive and the unattractive. It witnesses childhood, youth, and old age, as well as a countless number of other things. However, the observer fails to observe its own self. The Jeev looks at objects externally, but it does not look at its own self. Therefore, it is the most ignorant of the ignorant. Furthermore, just as the Jeev indulges in a countless variety of sights with the eyes, it similarly indulges and knows the pleasures of the other vishays with the ears, skin, tongue, and nose, but it does not indulge in the bliss of its own self, nor does it know its own nature. For this reason, it is the most ignorant of all ignorant, the most senseless of all the senseless, the most foolish of fools, and the vilest of the vile." At that point, Sukmuni raised a doubt. He asked, "Is it truly in one's own hands to see one's own self? If it is, why does the Jeev remain ignorant?" Shriji Maharaj replied, For a person who has attained satsang, realization of his jivatma does indeed lie in his own hands. In fact, when has he attempted to see his own self and failed to see it, having become dependent to and made helpless by Maya, that Jeev draws within and enters the dream and deep sleep state, but never does it draw within its own accord to see its own self. On the other hand, one who contemplates on the glory of God and draws within one's own self, sees one's own self as extremely pure and luminous. In the middle of that luminance, one beholds the form of the manifest Purushottam Bhagwan and experiences bliss in the manner of Narad and the Sankadik. Therefore, all deficiencies which do remain in a devotee are due to his own laziness. This is the end of Gadara, first chapter, 20th Vachnamrut. Now, going back to that title, Shriji Maharaj says, the title of this Vachnamrut is An Ignorant Person Seeing One's Own Self. Obviously, I'm sure you understood what Bhagwan is talking about, the ignorant person, but we also want to focus on seeing one's own self. So, starting, the question was initially asked by Bhagwan, who is the most ignorant of all ignorant people? Now, ignorance is such a type of thing, such a barrier in one's life that not only does an ignorant person look foolish in the social world, but also you can see in religion, ignorance is also a foolish attribute to have. Now, what is the meaning of ignorance? Ignorance can also go along with arrogance. Ignorance is such a word which can be described as such that a person who just doesn't understand because of his own beliefs or because of his own understanding or purely simple because of his ego. So such a person is called ignorant. Now what Bhagwan is asking is, who is the most ignorant of all ignorant people? Now the Santos could not answer, so they folded their hands and humbly said, Maharaj, please give us the answer. So Bhagwan kindly answers that the Jeev, meaning the soul, which resides within the body, observes both the attractive and the unattractive. It witnesses childhood, youth, and old age, as well as countless number of other things. However, the observer fails to observe its own self. The Jeev looks at objects externally, but it does not look at its own self. Therefore, it is the most ignorant of the ignorant. Now, what Bhagwan is saying is that the Jeev, the soul, like we talked about last time, it resides within this body. Now, through this body, through its vrittis, as we talked about, it observes everything. Now, Bhagwan gives the words attractive, unattractive, witnesses childhood, youth, and old age. Now, how can we witness this? How can we see this? Obviously, with our perception of our eyes. Also, the experience we share. Now, just think, our eye is no bigger than 1 inch. Doesn't weigh more than 6 or 7 ounces, yet it can see the whole world, and from that it can capture and record it inside. What I want you to think about is our soul is kind of like a hard disk. I think we talked about it last time. Such a hard disk where whatever it sees, whatever it observes, whatever it witnesses through these 5 senses, it records and then it stores it in the hard disk in the form of our soul. In the same way, our eye observes everything, experiences everyone, sees all kinds of forms, witnesses attractive as well as unattractive, everything. Also, ourself, meaning this body, experiences childhood, youth, and old age, meaning we can see the phases in our life. When we were a baby, then when we are a youth, a teenager, a young adult, an adult, and then finally an old man or an old woman. Now, when we become at that stage and we look at our picture when we were a small child or a young teenager, we are witnessing or we have witnessed that phase of our own life. Meaning the soul inside has witnessed this through the body. It has witnessed all these kinds of phases. Now what Bhagwan is saying, it has witnessed countless number of things. Meaning tastes, different, just imagine, even in one single day, how many tastes, how many different kinds of, you can say, tastes, or how many different kinds of different foods have we put in our mouth in one single day? Now counting that 365 days in a year, and counting that 50, 60, 70 years in our whole life, just imagine what different tastes have we tasted. Just imagine how many forms have we seen through the eyes. Just imagine how many words have gone inside of our ears. Just imagine how many things have we felt. Just imagine how many things we have smelled. All these things, countless number of things, Bhagwan says. Half or more than half of things that we don't even remember. I can even say 80 or 90% of things we don't even remember we have done, we have witnessed through this body. However, the observer, meaning the soul itself, he's the one who's observing, sitting inside. He's the one who's observing. Just think of our body as a car, and inside the driver as the soul. Now the soul is the one who is driving the car, meaning the driver is the one who is driving the car. He is the one who is steering left, right. He is the one who is accelerating. He is the one who is putting the brakes on. He is the one who is putting the car in park, everything. In the same way, the soul is experiencing everything, making this body move, making this body do everything. In the same way, it's controller. It is controlling the body. Similarly, however, Bhagwan says, the observer fails to observe its own self, meaning the soul witnesses everything outside, but it does not look within itself. The jiv looks at objects externally. Through the senses, the jiv, meaning the soul, looks at each and every object externally, but it does not look at its own self, meaning it does not experience who I am, the soul itself. What am I? We see this body. We can say that my name is Ajit Bhagat. We can say that I am a priest. I can say that I have a beard. I can say I have black hair. Now, what am I doing? Through the soul, through my soul, I am observing this body from external point. But no one, or according to this Vachnamrut, one is not introspecting. One is not looking within oneself to see who I really am. I'm not this body. If I was this body, then right now, this body is the age of 24 years old. Where was this body 30 years ago? And where will this body be after 70 years? Who knows? But the soul, which is eternal, the soul, which will never perish, which is forever, that one must observe in order to see one's own true self. And what Bhagwan says is, therefore, it is the most ignorant of ignorant. Why is it ignorant? Or who is the most ignorant? The person who does not see its own self and observes everything else around itself. Moving on. Furthermore, just as the jiv indulges in a countless variety of sights with the eyes, it similarly indulges and knows the pleasures of the other vishays with the ears, skin, tongue, and nose, but it does not indulge in the bliss of its own self, nor does it know its own nature. For this reason, it is the most ignorant of ignorant, the most senseless of senseless, the most foolish of fools, and the most vilest of vile. Meaning, Bhagwan is saying, just how we talked about, through our senses, we are able to indulge in countless number of things, and we have indulged in countless number of things. Yet, we are not able to see our own self. That's why Bhagwan is saying that there is so much countless bliss in the soul, but one fails to look inside, and one keeps looking externally. Due to that, one remains miserable. The very point, the very initial point, what Bhagwan is trying to say is recognize your own self. Who am I really? If I was this body, then will I be this body after 100 years? Now, scientifically, we look the average life expectancy of humans, male, female, is, let's just say, 80 or 70 to 80 years old. After that, there's very few cases that go to 90, 100, and above. But looking at that scientific point, we can see that no one lives more than 200 or 300 or even 150 years. Yet, we understand this body is going to perish. Yet, no one even has a single thought that inside the body there lives the soul. And that soul is my true form, not this body. Due to that, misery arises. Why? Because when we get into some kind of illness or we have some kind of disease, we believe, oh, I have the disease. My life is over. There's nothing I can do about this. But that's only if one believes oneself to be the body. One becomes miserable due to that, correct? Another statement, financial basis. You're about to apply for bankruptcy. So it feels like you have a load on your mind and stress and tension is going through your head. Why? You believe yourself to be the body, not the soul. But if one can understand oneself to be different from the body and introspect, initial stage to go to God is to understand one's own self. Just think, if you cannot understand or know your own self, how will you know an entity which is beyond everything? Maya, the illusion that we're seeing, beyond countless number of souls that roam around, beyond countless number of universes, such an entity that we call the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Godhead, how will we be able to understand Him? That's why the initial stage to become a devotee or to understand and take ourselves and walk on the path of liberation is to first understand our own self. And that's why Bhagwan has spoken this Vachnamrut. And that's why those saints that are compiling the Vachnamrut have written it down and has been verified by Bhagwan, because this is what one needs to do first in order to take the next step, and finally, in order to attain God. So, at that point, Sukmuni raised a doubt. He's asked, is it truly in one's own hands to see one's own self? If it is, why does the Jiva remain ignorant? Now, Sukmuni asked a question that, is it in our control to see our own self, or is it beyond our control? And if it is in our control, why do we remain ignorant? Meaning, even if we know that we can control it. For example, if you know that you can control what grades you get, meaning in the form of how much effort you make, in the form of how much practice you perform on an equation or whatever, formula, if your practice is there, if your effort is there, then you know that you're bound to get a good grade on your test. In the same way, Sukmuni is asking, if you know, or is it, first it is in one's own self, then if it is, then why does that person remain ignorant? What is the reason why he is not recognizing his own self? And Bhagwan gives a flawless answer. Bhagwan says that for a person who has attained satsang, meaning religion, the Swaminarayan religion, realization of his jivatma, meaning his soul, does indeed lie in his own hands. First question, Bhagwan says, yes, it is in your own hands. Second, in fact, when has he attempted to see his own self and failed to see it? Bhagwan is countering and asking, when have you tried and you haven't seen your own self? First, Bhagwan is saying, where's your effort? Have you made an effort to see your own self? Have you made an effort to see, or at least think, that I am not this body, I am this soul? Then you can go on and ask, why do I remain ignorant? If you have not made this process possible. Having becoming dependent to and made helpless by Maya, meaning illusion, meaning this worldly pleasures, that jiva draws within and enters this dream and deep sleep state, but never does it draw within its own accord to see its own self. Meaning, that jiva, inside, we go to sleep and enter dream state and deep sleep state. Yet, that jiva does not enter to see one's own self, that I am the soul, I am not the body. On the other hand, one who contemplates on the glory of God and draws within one's own self, sees one's own self as extremely pure and luminous. Now here's the process to see one's own self. Bhagwan is saying, one who contemplates on the glory of God and draws one within one's own self can see extremely pure and luminous light. What first one needs to do is understand the glory of God. Without understanding who Bhagwan is, how he is, one cannot attain Atma-darshan, or see one's own true self. Now, you may think it's a paradox. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to attain God. But the initial stage is to see my own self, or to recognize myself not this body, the soul. On the other hand, you're saying this, and then you're saying, I still need to understand who God is. How can I understand if I have not passed this first point? Well, what Bhagwan is saying in this Vachnamrut is that understand the glory of God. From scriptures and from associating with saints, one can at least understand and find out that the very God that I have attained is supreme and beyond all entities. There is no higher entity above him. There is no entity even equal to him. But all entities, all incarnations, every form, everything is underneath him. Also, if one understands God to be the all-doer, the creator, destroyer, and sustainer of this cosmos, this is the glory of God. Just think, who has made this world? Who can make all this? Humans have not been able to even make these natural disasters. Then who is making all these natural disasters, such as tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, the even rain that falls? Humans have not been able to create that. Then who is doing all this? It is one and only, the supreme God. Yet, people feel that this can't be the work of God. But let me ask you a question. If there is a brick wall, and beyond the brick wall, there's a diamond, and you're standing on the other side of the brick wall, now if someone tells you that there's a diamond beyond the brick wall, you're not going to believe that person. You're going to think he's a fool. But if you had faith inside of that person, if you had trust in his words, then you would be like, even if I can't see, this person is saying, because he has experienced and he knows, then there is something in the form of a diamond beyond the brick wall. In the same way, just because we can't see doesn't mean it's not there. Right now, we're on the planet Earth. Now, we believe that there's Earths or different kinds of planets that support life beyond this galaxy or beyond even the solar system, we believe. Now, why did you believe? You can't see it. People don't know. Scientists don't know. Yet you believe. Also, due to that, one believes that, yet one does not believe in God. Then where did all this come from? So, faith is the first step. Understanding the glory of God, who God is. There is a God. There is a supreme God. There is one God that controls everything. Such a God that we are talking about, Bhagwan Swaminarayan, such a God we have received. Due to that, after what Bhagwan is saying, after contemplating on the glory, he draws within his own self and sees one's own self extremely luminous. Now this is what Bhagwan wants us to do. What he wants us to do is pull ourselves within and see within oneself. Amidst that luminous light, one beholds the form of the manifest Purushottam Bhagwan. One sees the form of God inside of that soul and experiences bliss in the manner of Narad and Sankardik. Therefore, all deficiencies which do remain in a devotee are due to his own laziness. The only reason why we can't see our own self is because Bhagwan is saying laziness. If one really tried, one can attain not only to see one's own self, but one can attain God. So, wrapping our lecture up and wrapping this Vachnamrut up, the initial step in order to attain God is to first understand one's own self. Not to be this body, but to be the soul. And in order to think in this process, one must understand that this body's lifespan is temporary, but the soul which resides inside is forever, timeless. You know how small kids sometimes ask that, I want to live forever, or I wish I can live forever. Yet that wish is true, but one just doesn't recognize it. One soul is forever. Just how God is forever, in the same way, our soul is forever. So, understanding that we are not the body, we are the soul, we should move on and we should start to understand the glory of God and worship God. This is the initial stage in order for us to attain the Supreme Lord Head, Bhagwan Swaminarayan. So please, again, if you have a Vachnamrut, analyze it, read the Vachnamrut, it's Gadarab, first chapter, 20th Vachnamrut, and understand what Bhagwan is trying to say. Understand what he is saying and put it into your practical life in order to make progress. Hare Krishna Maharaj Ni Jai.